This is Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! We did it!
Here's your host, Paul Sir.
What's that, bud? Okay. Good morning and welcome to a special edition of the Basketball Show. I'm your host. Well, that's not the basketball show. I'm already off track. I'm really flustered today, Josh, because we're on YouTube. I've actually got to look into a camera right now, so I'm going right back to muscle memory. And this is Hoop City with Paul Sir, along with Josh Fenwick. Josh, good morning.
Good morning, Paul. How are we doing today?
Well, we can only go up from here.
I'm inclined to agree. You call it the basketball show right off rip. You know what? Things could be worse.
Things could be worse. Absolutely. It was a great name for a show, but we're really excited that it's Hoop City right now. You can listen and watch our show on a variety of different platforms. Of course, you can listen on Sports 1440 on your radio. You can also listen online at sports1440.ca on your phone, etc. Watch us on YouTube. And we are on a variety of podcast platforms. So if you can't check us out right now, you can watch us or listen to us later. So thank you for spending your morning with us today. And we have a great, great show today. I'm excited to announce our guest list. But first of all, Josh, why don't you tell our listeners about and our viewers about what our poll question is?
All right. Our poll question today is, hold on, let me just make sure I have it here. All right. Poll question. Most impressive early season team performances. We have Toronto, Phoenix, Detroit, or Houston. That will be up on our X.com. Everything's happening on an X account in the next couple minutes here.
Fantastic. And I think it's an interesting question because when we talk about teams that we expected to do well, that maybe over the past few seasons haven't done as well, I don't really think the names of these teams would have been what we would have expected it to be. Phoenix has been a dumpster fire over the last few years, but they've come out of the gates really impressively. They made a strategic trade, and we're going to talk a little bit about one of those key pieces, which is Dillon Brooks, the Canadian who had a very successful career in Memphis, or in Houston rather, and was doing extremely well there, moved over to Phoenix, and he's brought that toughness and that edge and that attitude with him, and it's certainly bearing out results. And I've got a funny story, a very typical Dillon Brooks story that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But Toronto, of course, doing extremely well. Our guests today really have a great lineup. Nate, here in town in the ACAC, they're led by two wonderful young coaches, Adika Peter McNeely. That name is very familiar to Edmonton basketball fans because of Adika's tremendous career for 6 years playing with the Edmonton Stingers. After a stellar collegiate and post-secondary professional career overseas, played really well for the Stingers, is still an assistant coach with the Stingers, but is the head coach at Nate and doing extremely well, nationally ranked, as are the women at Nate as well under Kira Lyons. Kira has been at Nate, I think this is her 4th season, and it's really, her program's really taking root. They had a tough loss we'll talk about last night, but Kira's going to be joining us as well in the 1020 segment. And then in the 1040 segment, we're going to have Steve Sir, my son Steve, who has been Canada's #1 3x3 player for about 8 years. And now Steve is off. He's on a flight right now, heading down to Mexico, where he is going to be in a training camp with the Canada Basketball Americup team. And they're going to be competing next weekend in Mexico, as will the women. Last year, the men won a bronze, first ever medal for the men, and the women won gold in the Americup. And they're going to be down there, the women, of course, to defend their gold medal performance, But the men, they have their eyes set on a different color of metal as well. So we'll be talking with Steve in the 1040 segment. Then at 11 o'clock, very, very excited to have Pat Boylan. And Pat is the play-by-play voice of both the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever. And Pat has been on our show many, many times. And what I am excited about is the Pacers aren't the team they were last year when they went to the NBA Finals, are they, Josh?
No, they aren't. But I think it kind of is crazy how important Tyrese Halliburton is to the whole operation they're running over there. For them to be where they are now, I don't think they've won an additional game yet. Are they still one in?
No, they did defeat.
They did.
They did win the other night. They beat. I want to say it was Washington. That was, also
the lowly Wizards.
Yeah, the lowly Wizards. There are a few teams that are really in the cellar this year.
They beat the Hornets.
Okay. Charlotte's been up and down. They almost beat the Raptors last week. Raptors had a nice surge at the end and were able to come back and beat the Hornets. But we're going to talk to Pat about how the mighty have fallen, but what the reasons are for that and how difficult it is to keep a winning program going, because there are external factors that you can't control that oftentimes make for a very difficult change in a team's performance and culture. So we'll be with Pat, but he's going to be with us on the deep dive at 11. And in the second segment, after we talk about the Pacers and the Fever, we're going to dive into Steve Kerr's remarks about what he feels needs to be done to address the problems that they're having in the NBA with key players suffering so many injuries. So we're going to go into a few of the deep topics in the NBA right now that are certainly on people's minds. Every week we try to do what we call 3 from Deep. We're going to change the format up a little bit today. Josh, why don't you fire the 3 questions at me and we'll have a good discussion about them.
All right. Let's go one by one here. Steve Kerr's call for change to the NBA schedule to reduce injuries, pace, emphasis on three-point shooting, expectations on playing hurt, load management, back-to-backs.
That's that one that you don't have to read that one. Oh. Sorry about that, but
that's okay.
We're going to talk with Pat Boylan about this in more in depth, but I did want to touch on it because Kerr, who won multiple championships as a player, multiple championships as a coach, is known as a player's coach, has won the gold medal, obviously, for the United States. I mean, when Steve Kerr talks, you have to listen. And I think Kerr makes some good points. 82 games, that's a lot. I think, though, what people struggle with, Josh, is these players make so much money. And why, in the era of Chuck Taylor's being the prevalent footwear, nothing even resembling the kind of training, diet, nutritional, physiotherapy, all of the resources that the modern NBA athlete has. Why were players like John Stockton and Michael Jordan, who played in an incredibly physical era, why were they able to oftentimes play 82 games, where now 82 games, that's a real badge of honor because so few people are able to do that. And I think what Kerr is trying to address is that the game has changed. It's much faster in its pace. The players on defense have to cover much more territory because of the emphasis on the three-point shot. But on the other hand, when you start talking about load management, which was really popularized in San Antonio, starting first with the Duncan, Robinson, Ginobili, Parker era, but then really took root with Kawhi Leonard, of having star players taking nights off, particularly with back-to-backs. And Kerr is trying to say, maybe we need to go from 82 games down to 62 or 70 games, number one. And number two, if we eliminate back-to-backs, the wear and tear from travel, etc., that might be lessened. Like I said, we're going to dive into this with Pat, who sees it on a daily basis, and certainly in Indiana, when you're dealing with the severe injury that Tyrese Halliburton has, you really have to look at it and say, well, is there something to what Kerr's saying? Just a real quick thought on your part, Josh. Is there something to a reduction in in the number of games? And is there a snowball's chance in where that the NBA would ever do this?
I think a reduction in games would be a good place to start. Will the NBA ever do it? Nope. It's a numbers game for the NBA. Got to make money. There are 82 games, and I think they've decided that they make money there, and so that's where they want it. My thought on the whole thing is I think there is validity to the high tops versus low tops shoe discussion and the help that it gives an ankle for stability. I also think that the AAU tournaments that kids start at, like we have NBA players that are like, oh, well, that kid's going to the NBA at like 12 years old. And they play in AAU tournaments every weekend. They basically have a full career of time on the court under them, except they're not playing in NBA physicality. They're not playing at NBA pace, but they're still running around and they're doing all this stuff. And I think it's seriously hurting them in the long run because they are tacking on an extra 5 years to the start of their career, essentially. And I think their athletes' bodies just aren't made to go that way unless you're a special breed like a LeBron James or Tom Brady, honestly.
It's interesting. Those are really interesting observations because you're really talking about overuse at a young age. There's a lot to be said for that. I do agree with what you're saying, Josh. I think you really have to weigh it out as well about the 12-month athlete. When you're told at 12 years old that you have to play year-round, otherwise somebody else is getting better than you, and that's going to affect your ability to go on to the next level, the intense pressure to play year-round and be a specialized athlete at a young age really does have to, I think, have a seminal moment where more and more voices, which are out there, by the way, a lot of basketball players encourage young athletes to be multi-sport athletes in their own right. Try other sports. Take some time off. But one of the things we're going to explore over the coming months is the impact of the pressure that is put on kids and families to participate, whether it's AAU, it's club basketball in Canada, to be playing all the time. Otherwise, things aren't going to work out the way that you want to. Somebody else is in the gym getting better. I really think that needs to be discussed. So that's a great point. Let's go to number 2.
All right, number 2, the Minnesota Timberwolves are your hometown team.
They are.
What happened in last night's 114-113 loss to Phoenix?
Wolves were up by 8. Now, this is an NBA team with all NBA talent. They were up by 8 with 50 seconds to go. In the last 50 seconds, here's a stat line for you, Josh.
All right.
0 for 1 from the field, 0 for 2 from the free throw line with 2 turnovers, and they lost on a Phoenix Gillespie floater with 6.4 seconds left. The Wolves' record is interesting. They are perfect against sub-500 teams, and they're perfect against teams above 500, only it's in the opposite direction. They have not won a game against a plus 500 team. Now, last night, Dylan Brooks, I mentioned him earlier, the Canadian, who is known, who has a reputation for his stare down to LeBron James, tough guy attitude, kind of hard-nosed play, which is in a lot of ways quite entertaining and very refreshing. But I think what Dylan last night, the Phoenix makes the basket, he tosses it to the officials, which you can't do. It slows the game down. And it was the second violation. There had been a warning earlier. Really should have been a technical foul on Brooks, but the officials didn't call that. Now, that's hometown sour grapes. I realize the blame for this loss squarely on the Timberwolves. I like the Timberwolves team, particularly their top 5, and I like their top 7 when Conley coming off the bench, and of course Naz Reid, who started out slowly but has had some great games coming off the bench. Last year's 6th man of the year. But boy, when you go beyond number 7, I don't know about this team. They really have a lot of question marks about how good they're going to be. But that's, again, not why they lost last night. They lost with their best players on the court. They just blew it. They didn't take care of the ball. It was sloppy. It was undisciplined. It's not typical of a Chris Finch coached team, and I'm sure they're hearing about it today in practice. Let's go to number 3.
Number 3, Lenny Wilkens passed away recently. He was in Edmonton in 2008 for a coaching clinic. Do you have any personal stories about his visit?
Very fond memories of the honor of having Lenny Wilkens in 2008 here in Edmonton. We had it was the year that Canada basketball and Canada as a country switched over completely to using FIBA rules. Up until that time, Canada had used either NCAA rules or modifications of NCAA rules. But in 2008, they went full-fledged into FIBA basketball. Now, Lenny Wilkens was brought up for this clinic, not so much to talk about the FIBA changes. That was done with other coaches, with the officials, but it was a very probably the best attended coaching clinic we've ever had, I believe, in Edmonton. We had somewhere around 250 to 300 coaches and officials at this event. And Lenny was there. He got out on the court at Harry Ainley, walked people through the drills, did all of the things that you would expect a Hall of Fame coach to do. From this vantage point, Lenny made the point, you become a great player when nobody's watching. It is the time you put in purposefully on the right things that's going to make you a great player. So listen, Josh, to what Lenny Wilkens accomplished. He's been inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame not once, not twice, 3 times as a player, as a coach. And by the way, he's both the winningest and the losingest coach in NBA history, but also with the 1992 Dream Team. He was an assistant coach on the 1992 Dream Team. He was named to both the 50th and 75th anniversary all NBA teams. Like I said, he was understated, quiet, dignified, but I had the opportunity to pick him up at the airport and take him out to lunch. And Lenny let his hair down, so to speak. And what he did was he told me a ton of stories about his experiences as a player, as a coach, some of the personalities that he played with, against, and coached with and against. And it was hilarious, to be honest. When Lenny let his hair down, the language got a little saltier. The edge of him as a player became a little more apparent. And the thing I liked about Lenny was his sincerity. Later that year, about 3 months later, I went to Las Vegas to watch Canada play the United States, to watch their Olympic teams play in 2008. Lenny was there being honored along with a number of other NBA greats. Afterwards, I walked by him. He looked at me and goes, "Oh, hey, Paul, how you doing?" To have somebody remember you just shows that the guy was in the moment and that he was sincere. But we had greatness in our midst when Lenny Wilkens was here in 2008, just like we did just a couple of months ago when we had John Stockton in town for the Alberta Basketball Association's 50th anniversary celebration, with John being the keynote speaker. So once in a while, you're able to rub shoulders with greatness, and I certainly was privileged to be able to do that. We're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to focus on ACAC basketball with the head men's coach and the head women's coach from Nate. Both are nationally ranked. We'll talk to Adika and to Kira right after these messages.
This hockey season, they're all in at Metal Supermarkets. They were even practicing the wave around the lunchroom table. Till Bob's soup splattered everywhere.
I'm so hungry.
Poor Bob. Oh, well, gotta love the passion. Speaking of which, their team is all in on cutting metal to your exact specifications. And fast. Metal Supermarkets, the local convenience stores for Southside, West End, metalsupermarkets.com.
Picture this. You're exploring your favorite national or provincial park, utterly awestruck by the breathtaking nature all around you. Only you can keep our wilderness wild. Remember to leave no trace. Pack out all waste, including compostable food scraps. Stick to designated trails. And don't disturb wildlife. Always take photos from a safe distance. A grouchy grizzly makes a poor selfie companion. Let's all do our part to respect our natural spaces. To learn more about how you can preserve your favorite places, visit leavenotrace.ca today.
This is a local backstory, a showcase of businesses we're proud to call our friends. Here's Anita from Coleman's Greenhouse.
My sister and I manage the retail area as well as I'm the grower of the bedding plant crop. Of course, our business is quite large and we start in the spring with bedding plants and greenhouse, and then, it moves into the vegetable gardening. In the fall time, we have our Christmas store set up in November and December. We also have our full service flower shop. Angie and I are managing that whole retail kind of area through the whole year. We're open year round. It's sort of a job that's very continuously managing staff. And in the springtime, I do lots of watering, helping customers, answering questions. We're not just managers that sit behind a desk. We are out there working with our crews and making sure that customers see that.
Google Coleman's today. That's KUHLMANNS.
This is Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! We did it!
Here's your host, Paul Sir.
Welcome back. And I got to make sure I say it correctly here, Josh, to Hoop City with Paul Sir on your sports leader, Sports 1440. We're waiting for Adika Peter McNeely. Oh, he's on. That's fantastic. My first guest in this segment is Adika Peter McNeely. Adika is the head men's basketball coach at Nate, and they're off to a great start. 8-1 so far, nationally ranked. Adika, good morning. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Can you hear me, Adika?
I can hear you.
Okay, that's good. And Josh, are we doing okay? All right. You got to be smiling pretty there, Adika. You look good, man. You look good.
Thank you.
So last night, Adika, you continued your winning ways with your Nate Ooks defeating the University of Alberta Augustana Vikings handily. You go to 8-1. You're nationally ranked. Talk about the season thus far and what has been the key, or what are the keys to the success of the Ooks season so far?
Wow. I mean, we got to think about it. It's been a long season, even though we've only been playing until November. We've had a rough preseason that saw us go to Toronto. We played some college and university. We did not win a game. We came home. We played 4 preseason games or 5 preseason games, only won 1. And I told the guys, I'm like, the reason why I put these tough games is what we did. And it kind of started off with all our losses, especially we had a tough loss against Concordia in the preseason, and we had a heart-to-heart. And I told them, like, if you want to be a team that's going to be playing deep until March, these are the games that we have to go through right now to get better.
Well, I think when you frame the logic and the strategy behind that kind of move, where you're actually challenging the players early, I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom. And obviously, Adika, I'm stating the obvious here. It's paying off thus far in your season, but so often, whether it's football or basketball, teams load the schedule up early with weak sisters. And then they come out and they probably have a false sense of how good they are, where you're kind of going at it from the reverse angle and saying, this is what we need to work on, and our weaknesses are being exposed right out of the gate. Fair way to summarize?
For sure. Yeah, and that's kind of the model I kind of want to bring with the guys. I think from last year's success that we kind of had an idea like, oh, we're just going to be a top team in the ACAC and just kind of steamroll teams. And you know this, that the ACAC is a revolving door and teams going to be good that weren't good last year. So I kind of challenge these guys and being, hey, listen, like if you want to be the top dogs, we have to see the top teams. We're going to be playing the top teams early on, especially now with the South, and we can't just be happy with wins. Like even though we're winning basketball games, we know we have to get a lot better.
W's are ultimately the best letter that you can have by your record. We all understand that. But like you said, Adika, sometimes W's can cover up a lot of weaknesses that if they're not addressed early in the season, it can come back to bite you when it becomes crunch time. So Adika, you made an interesting comment about the ACAC being a quote unquote revolving door. And I don't think oftentimes people realize how fluid lineups are in ACAC teams. It's not that eligibility requirements aren't there. They certainly are. But it is a very fluid league in that you have players transferring from youth sports teams, coming from high school teams, crossing over from other college teams. What challenges does that present to a coach like yourself in terms of, first of all, with your team, building team culture as well as execution, but also in terms of recruiting, planning, and player development?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, last year we lost our 2 leading scorer at backcourt. One is now Omar Farah, who's at Division II, and obviously Peter now at McEwen. So with that, I kind of just go with the model of just having chemistry and having guys that are from the city, guys that know each other and want to come home and play. So regardless if you're transferring from different schools, like at least you have some connection to the city. And I think that's very important with our team. If you go on our roster right now, you can see a lot of Edmonton, Alberta roster guys. And I think it's been paying off for us a lot. So, but yeah, I mean, it's tough with the whole revolving door kind of scenario with the ACAC. But for us, we just trying to like have our guys and just invest in them and saying, hey, like you're with us regardless of 1 or 2, 3 years. Or what do you want to do? Like, we want you to be the best basketball player, the best student possible. And hopefully we just attain the right guys like that way.
I love your philosophy on recruiting local players because of the culture that you're able to build, because they do know each other. I think there's so much wisdom in that. A lot of times I think the notion of, or the stigma has been guns for hire being brought into the ACAC. And I don't want to lie, sometimes those are excellent players that come in and make an immediate impact on those programs. But ultimately, Adika, what's your philosophy as a coach? Like, what's your baseline of what you want your players to get out of their experience, not just playing on your team, but also being a student at Nate?
I just want to challenge them. Like, I know me being a professional athlete and now reverting into being coach. And I think you go through a lot of challenges as a young man. And that's what I'm trying to do for these guys. You know, like there's going to be tough times where you might miss a test or not get the greatest mark, but how do you deal with adversity? And that's what I try to push these guys in the classroom. We have study hall 2 times a week, and I make sure you guys have to be there. It's not an optional where I just show up when I want to show up. Weight room, guys need to get stronger, get more flexible. We're watching a lot of film, like three times a week. We're watching film, twice on us and then once on our opponents. So I really push these guys beyond the boundaries, saying if you guys want to get to the next level, you have to put the work in, regardless of what you do.
Well, Adika, I can say this from my observation of you both as not both, as a player, as a coach, and as a person. Your players are very fortunate to have someone with your experience, your background, and your philosophy, because they will be better off not just as a player on the court, but as a person off the court under your mentorship. Thanks so much for joining us today. We will get you back on in the new year. Best of luck rounding out the rest of your ACA schedule leading into Christmas, and continued success. Keep rising up those rankings.
All right. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Adika Peter McNeely, men's head coach at Nate, 8-1. They are nationally ranked, as I mentioned. Now, also, I don't want to say Kira's office is across the hall from Adika, but Kira Lyons was an excellent college player at the University of Saskatchewan, and She now has her best team as a head coach of the women's Nate Oaks program. And Kira joins us today as well. Kira, how are you today?
I'm a little heartbroken. We had a tough one last night, but overall, doing fantastic.
You did have a heartbreaker. Like, you really did have a heartbreaker. 67-66 loss to Augustana. Talk about the game. What was the difference in the game that led to that outcome?
Yeah, I mean, we were tied at half, and then up, I think, the whole second half until the last 10 seconds, I think. So truly a heartbreaker. Yeah, we made some mental errors at the end that, were crucial. We didn't use the clock like we should have. We allowed a 3 that you just can't allow at that time of the game. Just some things that, we can definitely, that are in our control. So even though it was, pretty devastating and heartbreaking, Augustana's good. Like, they're undefeated at home. We're in their gym. It's always really hard to play in their barn. The crowd was crazy. It was very playoff atmosphere, which was incredibly fun. And we played really well. We truly did. And it's cliche to say, but you learn more from a loss. And I truly, truly believe that we learned some incredibly valuable lessons from last night. And so I'm really grateful for that.
It's a great way to frame it, even though I know the competitor in you and in your team would much rather have learned the lessons with a W attached to it. But I think, though, Kira, you did hit on something that's really important for both coaches and players to always remember, is that winning and losing is an outcome of a process. And what you're talking about is learning your lessons that will come back you're going to face another close game. You're going to face the situations that you just described where you have to take care of the ball in order to win a particular game, where you have to stop the 3 or run somebody off the line. What do you do? How do you go back now into the gym with your players to try to consolidate the learning of what they just experienced?
A few things. The first one is, like I told them, like, you're allowed to be upset today. And then it's gone, right? Like, the season isn't won or lost in November. And like you said, like, the lessons at those tight games are so important. And we won a tight game the weekend before. And so being in these really close games at this point of the season is so valuable for us. And as much as we work on it in practice, like we do end game scenarios in practice, or we're at a point now in our development where we can start doing those things and playing out scenarios in practice. Nothing's like in a game, like when the big lights come on, there's just nothing like it. And so the fact that we're having those close games right now is really preparing us for playoffs, for nationals, for, when the peak of our season arrives, and we'll be familiar and we'll have a calmness and a confidence because we've been there before. We understand what we need to do. We understand the importance of executing our game plan right to the very last minute. And we know what it feels like to lose. We also know what it feels like to win those games. And I think that just experiencing that is incredibly important. And so it's, like I said, it's heartbreaking, but I'm super grateful.
I'm talking with Kira Lyons. She is the head basketball coach of the women's team for the Nate Oaks here on Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440. Kira, is this your 4th season at Nate? Did I get that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
4 years into it. Now, when you started, I think it's fair to say, as a head coach, you had never been a head coach of a women's collegiate program. What were the lessons that were the most challenging to learn that now seem rather routine to you with you being a new head coach?
I think recruiting is really big. Recognizing the things that I find important and that we value as a program. And, kind of having a guideline as to what are the things that we're looking for, and what are the things that we're trying to be aware of that we don't want, and being able to pick that out a little bit. Having the most skilled or the most talent isn't the most important to us. And earlier it was kind of, we had started from ground zero. They had graduated everybody after they won nationals when we took over. And now we've been able to be a bit more selective with how we're recruiting and the types that we're recruiting. and our retention has been phenomenal. Like we returned 10 from last year, and I think that that's a huge thing. But yeah, recruiting, the way that we recruit and who we recruit has been, it gets more solidified every year. And I think that that's one of the biggest things, is just the types of young women that we want in our program.
Well, Kira, I think the term retention is used less frequently in post-secondary basketball than it's ever been.
Yeah.
So kudos to you and your staff, and also to the young women on your team who have bought into your vision. Obviously, you have sold them on a vision that they want to be a part of, and Nate is the academic school of choice that they've wanted to pursue. So to have that kind of retention, that kind of carry forward and stability is a great accomplishment by you, and in no small manner is a big contributor to the type of success that you're having right now. What do you, Kira, see as your biggest challenge with your team moving forward? You're off to a good start. You're 7-2. You play SAIT next weekend. What does your team have to do now to not just remain sharp, but to continue to improve?
Oh, the list of things. Honestly, it's the mentality. It's the buy-in. It's the recognizing the big picture and the goals that we have for ourselves this season as a team, as a program, and just recognizing that, you know, there is no failure, there is no losing, there's just learning. And so, you know, we take a tough loss, and how do we react to it? How do we show up on Monday for practice? And how do we move forward and learn from that? And it's, like I said, losing is very valuable if you allow it to be. And so just being bought into the process, trusting our formula, trusting what we're doing, and just, you know, having the reaction of digging in and getting better. And all of these, every weekend we talk about, every day we talk about, it's about us. It's about us. It's about what we're building. It's not about who we're playing. It's everything that we do in the gym every single day is what wins us games. And we're in there together. And when the best matchup is in practice, that's when really good things start to happen. But you have to have incredible buy-in to have, you know, girls that aren't playing 35 minutes working just as hard as the ones that do. And that's something that we need to continue to work on, and something that we really need that buy-in from our bench. And that's what we've had. And that's a massive reason as to why we're being successful, is because our practices are so competitive, and girls go in off the bench and they do their job to the best of their ability. And we're able to be deep and hopefully be deeper as we go along in the season.
Controlling what you can control with the culture that you build. Kira, you're doing a marvelous job. Congratulations on your success so far, but I say that in a qualified way. I wish you nothing but continued success, growth, progress that meet and exceed your expectations and the expectations of all your players. Thanks so much for joining us today on Hoop City.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
Kira Lyons, head women's coach at Nate, joining us here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. We're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to have Steve Sir on. Steve's going to be talking about the upcoming FIBA 3x3 AmeriCup that will be happening next weekend in Mexico. Stay tuned.
This month in Sports History Moment is brought to you by Discount Diesel Parts.
On November 4th, 2001, the Arizona Diamondbacks put a pause on the four-peat. Behind co-MVPs Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling, the Diamondbacks beat the New York Yankees in the World Series in 7 games, putting an end to the Yankees' chance at a 4th straight World Series title and securing the first and so far only championship in Diamondbacks history.
Hi, folks. This is Big Al from Discount Diesel Parts. Interstate McBee is a highly respected manufacturer with over 70 years' experience in the heavy-duty diesel engine parts industry. And as an authorized dealer, we've been serving Western Canada with those high-quality engine parts for highway trucks, farm machinery, heavy equipment, transit, and marine, and at a great price, too. Reach us at discountdiesel.ca and know that Discount Diesel's got the parts to get it done.
60 years ago, we started selling trucks as Western GMC Buick. Today, we are Wolf GMC Buick. We're still located on the corner of 184th Street and Stony Plain Road with the same ownership for over 2 decades. Our customers have trusted our family-owned, community-driven business. And for that, We are thankful. If you're looking for a truck or SUV, pop in and one of our seasoned professionals will get you a great deal, hassle-free. Come trust our team at Wolf GMC Buick. Wolf GMC Buick. We're making it easy.
What keeps Alberta business moving? It's pallets, whether you're shipping, manufacturing, or looking for in-house storage solutions. Hi, it's Andrew with the Pallet Recycler here in Edmonton, and we've been providing reliable, affordable, recycled, and custom pallets for local businesses for the past 30 years. Contact the Pallet Recycler at 825-474-1981 to find out why recycled pallets are the most cost-effective way to move and store your product. Learn about our recycling program as well at thepalletrecycler.ca.
This is Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! We did it!
Here's your host, Paul Sir.
Welcome back to Hoop City here on Sports 1440. Your sports leader. This is Josh, this is late 60s Soul Week with our musical selection. I think I'm picking some tunes that you haven't really ever had to play before.
No, you asked me about Soul Deep.
By the Box Tops.
Oh, yeah. And so you're like, have you ever heard this one before, Josh? Absolutely not. Nowhere close to the musical taste of my parents or me or even my grandparents.
I'm more in the grandparent category in that respect, Josh, believe me. But there's so much great music from that era that whenever I have a chance to share some of that when we do our playlist and getting ready for the show, I love to do that. We're gonna show a conversation I had with my son Steve, who, as I mentioned in our opening remarks, is on a plane right now heading down to Mexico to get ready for the upcoming AmeriCup in FIBA 3x3. It is the last event of the year in 3x3 in what has been a very, very successful year. Steve started playing FIBA 3x3 back in 2016, and since 2017 has been the top-ranked FIBA 3x3 player from Canada. He's known as the best 3x3 shooter really ever in the history of 3x3. And he also has an international reputation as a great basketball coach, coaching the women's and men's national teams in Mongolia. And as odd as that may sound in terms of a basketball nation, the first part of my conversation with Steve deals with a really special experience they had this last year when the Mongolian women won a silver medal in the World Cup, which is just unthinkable a few years ago. So here's my conversation with Steve.
Welcome back to Hoop City with Paul Sir here on Sports 1440. I'm pleased to be joined by my son, Steve Sir. Steve, thanks so much for making time today.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody who knows basketball in Edmonton, in fact, in Alberta and in Canada, and even globally knows who Steve Sir is. Steve, of course, locally, Ross Shep, great, won 2 provincial championships. At Ross Shep, Steve has held the three-point percentage all-time leader title for now it's 19 years, right? 2007, last year that Steve played at Northern Arizona, had been the number one ranked team 3x3 player for Canada for 7 years, is a coach, mentor, and still a player. So Steve, welcome. And let's get started with the fact that this has been a season of transition for you. You coach the Mongolian national men's and women's teams. You've worked heavily with the development of their program. Talk about what the experience was like this year as you were juggling, trying to still play which you did, but also focusing primarily on coaching?
It was what you said it was. It was a big transition year. My responsibilities in Mongolia the last 4 years have involved a lot of coaching and a lot of player development work, along with playing for the Pro Tour team Ulaanbaatar and juggling those schedules. It makes for a busy time over there, but I've always enjoyed that. Of a lot of time in the gym day to day and seeing improvement with not just the group you're working with, but other players as well. This year was a little different. As we were hosting World Cup in Mongolia, there was a lot of excitement and a lot of anticipation for that event coming to the country, and a lot of prep work that went along with it to make sure that we were as competitive as we could be and put our best foot forward to showcase not just 3x3 and how it's really loved in Mongolia, but how that where our players are getting better along with it. So that made for a busy schedule, obviously. And I love getting in the gym myself. I'll always find time to get some shots up and do the things that keep the crazy away from me of just staying in shape and making sure I stay sharp. But the challenging part this year was there's staying in shape and there's keeping a rhythm, and then there's being in game shape, and there's being sharp enough to play. The 3x3 landscape continues to grow by leaps and bounds every year. The talent gets better, the teams get better, the level of competition continues to grow, and it's hard to I wouldn't say jump in and jump out, but it's hard to take extended breaks where you're not playing. And even though you stay connected to the game with a lot of watching and a lot of film, and you're on the court practicing, to not have that rhythm of playing events where you're able to put back-to-back events together and find yourself along with finding the rhythm that you need for your team, it's challenging. But that said, it was a challenge to take on, and it was one that I enjoyed. So it was a different version of what it's been in the past. But yeah, that's what's exciting about challenges. You take them head on and you see what you need to do to get them done.
You took the challenge head on, Steve, and you accomplished something from a coaching perspective that had never been done before in Mongolia. And by that, I mean no Mongolian team in any team sport had ever won a medal in a major international competition. That all changed this year with a silver medal performance by your women's team. 3 years ago, this was unthinkable. What had to happen in order to be able to compete at that level and be able to come away with a silver medal?
A lot of things. It was, to say that we were ahead of schedule would imply that this was on the schedule. This was not something that I think any of us who were involved with believed is the wrong word. I think anticipated that we were going to accomplish, especially at this time. The message, in particular on the women's side, has always just been we need to keep getting better. And I know that sounds very general, but there's a lot of small things that go into getting better when you're talking about a sports culture like Mongolia that is doing a lot of this stuff for the first time. So it's getting stronger. And part of that was us identifying a good strength and conditioning coach to work with our athletes that we were very fortunate to finally nail down this year with Toshiya Koyanagi from Japan. He was a real soldier for us. He worked his butt off to get our girls and our guys as prepared as possible physically. It's the recovery and treatment side of it that Craig Wilson from Pivotal Physiotherapy here in town in Edmonton was able to come over and work with our teams and with me to make sure that everyone's healthy to play. So building that infrastructure helped our girls get better. And then on the court, our message was always, we're not just hosting. We want to compete. We want to show that all the things that are going unseen, all the work that's happening in the gym where there aren't cameras and there isn't Instagram and all these pats on the back of, wow, you guys are doing so amazing. it has to be shown at a stage like World Cup in your country, in front of your people, in front of your family, and all the people that support you. It has to be on display. That didn't mean that it was going to be a medal. It was just more in line with, we're not just hosting. And that could have meant we competed and fought like crazy in pool and showed our best quality, and we didn't get out. But that was the main message. So there wasn't the pressure of, if we don't reach this platform, it's a failure. To give the women their credit, they bought into that completely. They fought like crazy. We went an extended period of time where we didn't have an event leading up to the World Cup. So we were doing a lot of practicing in Mongolia. We're scrimmaging against, under 18 boys teams, whatever we can put together to give the girls some run. And there was a lot of nervous anticipation of, we think we're getting better and we think we're ready, but we're not quite sure because we haven't been able to push and run against who we'll see in the tournament. And then prior to the tournament, we were able to arrange some scrimmages with the Canadian women's team. We were able to arrange a couple scrimmages with Singapore, and we were ready. The girls were focused. The girls were determined. We had a women's series stop right before the World Cup where we were so-so. And I think that acted as a good kick in the butt for our girls of like, hey, putting our best foot forward means actually having the courage to put it out there and know that it doesn't ensure success, but you have to have the guts to put it out there and really leave it out there. So once we were able to, I think, get the butterflies out of playing the women's series, then the girls were able to refocus for World Cup. And the rest is exactly what happened. They played amazing. They made the biggest plays during the tightest times. The amount of determination they had and the courage that they had to get out there and just compete was truly inspiring. And to see how the entire city and country in Mongolia rallied behind them, and not just them, the other teams that were at the event, other people all over the world who support the sport were all pulling for those women. So what they did was incredible. It was historic for the country. It's going to act as a huge conduit for change for basketball in the country, in particular for women. And now it puts them on the map in a way that a team in women's sports has never been on the map in Mongolia. And that's exciting to see because it was all through a belief that we could be better and the girls' hard work and determination to get that done.
Well, and watching from afar, the national pride that came out of that is exactly what you would hope would be the outcome, Steve. But talk about the way that that the country celebrated and embraced this accomplishment by the women, because as you said, this, to call it unprecedented is an understatement. This, some people have said it's the Jamaican bobsled team winning a medal, an Olympic medal. It's unthinkable. Like I mentioned the time frame 3 years ago that this was even a possibility. And the plays that the women made were incredible at the most pressure-packed time. It really was a real magical run, wasn't it?
It was. And, after it happened, there was a healthy appreciation for, we knew where we came from. We knew where we started. That whole idea, the Jim Valvano thing of where you started, where you are, and where you want to be. And when I got to Mongolia, and we couldn't win a game, it was, it was a real, to say it was uphill doesn't really do it justice. It was a straight vertical climb to try and get better. And again, to give the girls credit, we had to step away from the result 3 years ago and say, okay, we have to focus on what we're doing every day in practice that might also not lead to immediate result. But if we think about this as a marathon, it's going to build to something. And to give our women credit, our two best players, Hulan and Nobutar and Aruka, Aryan Sensei, they bought into that. And they were very determined to fight through some difficulty, to fight through some change in how we played, to allow me to really get on them in practice, to really yell at them and really hold them accountable, because they were our best players, and the players that were underneath them had to see that was going to be the hardest for our best players. And they kept believing in that. And then slowly but surely, We won a bronze medal at Asia Cup. First medal that we'd won up to that point, and it was very emotional for the women. And then, 2 months later, we won a women's series stop. Unthinkable the previous year. And, I'd love to say from an ego perspective that it's all coaching, but I know that the girls had to really fight to believe that there was something better in this for them, and that if they kept going, that they were going to see results, not just with wins, but improvement in their game and improvement in how they played, and a pride that you could take when you go on the court of you're not just getting killed every time you get out there. So what that stirred up in Mongolia is exactly what you would hope that it was an immense, deep pride for where these girls came from and what they had to do in order to get to where they were. It was met with all the amazing things that you would probably have on your dream list of what it would be. There was, a city procession where the girls and myself were, met with the president of Mongolia, and were awarded medals for accomplishment. Meeting with the prime minister, all the heads of state and political figures in Mongolia that acknowledged and recognized them. This is the first time, again, that women have ever been awarded a medal for an accomplishment in sport in their country. And then all the other acknowledgments and recognition that came along with this of, events and ceremonies that could showcase just who these women were and what they've done for their country. So it was inspiring. It was extremely gratifying. And, going through all of it, you had to just step back and let the girls soak this all in, because it's a once in a lifetime experience. And it's fun to reflect on because it was special to be a part of.
Talking with Steve Sir about 3x3 here on Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440. Steve, you are still playing, and in fact, you're getting ready to head down to Mexico to go down with a number of other Canadian men's players, and the Canadian women's team will arrive as well, and compete next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend in the AmeriCup. Talk about what you're doing, what you've done to prepare for that, what the week is going to look like in getting ready for this season-ending event. I believe it is the last event in the FIBA 3x3 calendar in the world. But talk about what's gone into getting ready for this.
Trying to make sure that you're prepared as possibly physically, make sure you're healthy, getting in the gym. We have a good culture for 3x3 here in Edmonton. So there's been the guys locally that'll get in the gym and play and get shots up and want to compete and push, guys like Chris Mooney and Ryan Coleman and Lee Danderfer, the guys who've been committed to 3x3 locally and want to see it grow. So they've been amazing for me to get in the gym and just be able to work. Sabri Phillip, who was with the Stingers, obviously he's been in there as well. That's something I've always enjoyed doing, look forward to doing. I do better when I have a goal, when I have something to chase. It's harder to just get in the gym to be in the gym. Even though you enjoy it, it's much more of a motivator, and you're able to have a narrower focus when you're preparing for something specific. Working with Craig Wilson at Pivotal to make sure that everything's ready to go physically, which has been something that he supported me with for the last 9 years, pretty much my entire 3x3 career since I shifted from 5-on-5. And then on the team side, our group that has been selected to go down there to compete, to have a condensed training camp before the AmeriCup, to get some reps together, to figure some stuff out. We've done a couple of video sessions online to make sure that we're speaking the same language before we get down there. And I think so far it's been very positive, and everyone seems very excited. I mean, it's a long season of 3x3. Everybody has their different journey and experience with this sport of, playing here, playing there, losing this, winning that. And now you get down to the end, and it's as exciting an event as you'll get, because you get to play for your country and you get to represent Canada and have an opportunity to compete for a medal, which the more you do this, it's easier and easier to understand that those opportunities just don't come around very often. So I'm excited. I know all the other guys and the staff that are coming down are very excited, and it's going to be a lot of fun and a real good challenge to try and build off of what we accomplished last year at the AmeriCup.
Thanks so much for spending time talking about 3x3. Of course, we wish you and your teammates nothing but the greatest success down in Mexico as you ramp up to play in the AmeriCup. And thanks for spending time with us today on Hoop City.
Thanks for having me.
Your all-access pass to the world of sports is Edmonton's only sports radio station.
From pre- and post-game hockey shows to in-depth analysis from your favorite commentators, the action never stops on Sports 1440.
Align custom skate performance, where precision meets passion.
When you hit the ice, it's all about you and your skates. The stride, the feel, the glide, the power, the performance. At its core, skating is about movement. You use the thin metal blades of your skates to fly across the ice. Every step, turn, and edge is controlled and deliberate. Raw, powerful, explosive. It's about making difficult things look easy. Control, speed, and purpose under pressure. So why trust your skates to a grinding machine? Or even worse, a tournament parent in the dark parking lot. At Aligned Custom Skate Performance in Sherwood Park, the art of skate fitting and sharpening is all customized to the athlete. Artisanally handcrafted and 100% human. For you or your athletes, book an appointment today and experience the difference.
Align custom skate performance, where precision meets passion.
Visit AlignedSkate.com to learn more.
What keeps Alberta business moving? It's pallets, whether you're shipping, manufacturing, or looking for in-house storage solutions. Hi, it's Andrew with the Pallet Recycler here in Edmonton, and we've been providing reliable, affordable, recycled, and custom pallets for local businesses for the past 30 years. Contact the Pallet Recycler at 825-474-1981 to find out why recycled pallets are the most cost-effective way to move and store your product. Learn about our recycling program as well at thepalletrecycler.ca.
Start your day with a blast of sports. Kevin Carius, along with Brandon Douglas, brings the fire, the fun, and the fearless takes. Weekdays, 7 to 11. Text Kevin, 883-401-1440. Mornings with Sports 1440. Mall and Wetaskiwin. CKJR is a Stingray radio station.
Download the free Radio Player app and listen wherever you go.
This is Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! We did it!
Here's your host, Paul Sir.
That's all we're looking for, Josh, is just a little respect. The great Aretha Franklin in our late 60s soul playlist today. Thank you for joining us here on the Hoop City extravaganza here on your sports leader, Sports 1440. I'm Paul Sir. He's Josh Fenwick. There was a comedy show called Laugh-In in the 60s. I'm really hanging up on the 60s today. And they had this, every week they had this award called the Fickle Finger of Fate Award. And I'll tell you, the Fickle Finger of Fate has certainly been in the locker rooms and on the court for the Indiana Pacers this year. They have had so much adversity that they've had to overcome. And it's gone, and the record speaks for itself. They've gone from NBA finalists to a 2-14 record so far, but that doesn't mean they're poorly coached or that the team isn't playing hard. They are, and they are. And to discuss this is our friend Pat Boylan, who is the radio play-by-play voice for both the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever, and he joins us today. Pat, it is great to have you back on the show.
Good to be back with you, Paul.
And, you know, it's 2-14, far cry from the, being in the NBA Finals, but I mean, when you talk about circumstances that are outside of your control, of course, there's the terrible injury to Tyrese Halliburton that really took any chance out of the Indiana Pacers being able to compete with OKC in the finals, even though they fought admirably. But without Halliburton being at his best, that was almost an impossible task. But now the injuries that your team has suffered, along with the departure of Miles Turner, you guys have just had a lot of adversity in Indianapolis, haven't you?
Well, it just kind of felt like the first 6 or so months of the calendar year 2025, nothing could go wrong. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton is living this charmed basketball life where he's hitting the 4 different clutch shots in the playoffs, really unlike anything that has ever been seen, I think, in NBA history. The Pacers are, of course, a good team, but they're a 4 seed, and we know in the NBA that 4 seeds maybe win a playoff series too if they get really hot, but rarely come to Game 7 of the NBA Finals. It just seemed like they could do no wrong, and then it almost feels like that horrific injury you're referencing, which was the Achilles tear in Game 7, which really took their chances away of winning a championship. Everything that went right for 6 months straight, it feels like everything has gone wrong for maybe not 6 months since then, because there was a little bit of an off season for the Pacers in there, but really ever since things picked back up. You know, you went into this season knowing that you're going to be without your best player, that's going to be really challenging in a sport like basketball and in a league like the NBA that's star driven. You know, you have to be realistic about what that means. But at the same time, the Pacers accomplished what they accomplished last year in large part because of their depth, in large part because of how good they were 1 through 10. And so I was still quite optimistic that this was going to be a team that was going to push for a playoff spot. You know, it wouldn't have shocked me if they stayed healthy in the early portion of the season, if they were, you know, pushing that 4 seed again. You know, Andrew Nembhard is a Canadian and a terrific point guard, and the Pacers have known that for a long time. And unfortunately, the circumstances have just been the opposite. They just went through a rash of injuries to nearly every significant player, really besides Pascal Siakam in the early portion of the season here. You know, Nembhard went down, I think, in the second quarter of opening night. It was Canadian on Canadian friendly fire there. He got caught up in a locked arm situation with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and that just kind of was the domino of what was a ton of injuries early on. They seem to be maybe stabilizing here a little bit. The injury situation has gotten better. It's still not good, but it is better. Benedict Mathurin has come back. A couple of guys have come back, and they're playing more competitively and got their second win of the season on Wednesday. But yeah, far cry from where we were talking back in April, May, and June. And, you know, unfortunately, injuries are just the massive storyline for the Pacers. And I know we'll probably talk Fever at some point here as well. It was kind of the story of the Fever season as well. And it's the story that you least want to talk about because it's the one that really is the uncontrollable, and nobody wants to see any team stars go down, whether it's your own team or anybody else's.
That's so true, Pat. You don't want to see any stars go down. And the second part of our conversation today on the deep dive, we're going to talk about Steve Kerr's recent suggestions and observations about some possible avenues on how to fix this rash of injuries that are continuing to happen to star players and to players across the spectrum. But sticking with the Pacers, you lose Miles Turner. How much of a shock was that to you, Pat?
Oh, on a 1 to 10, I would give it maybe an 8 or a 9. It was pretty shocking. You know, things. Miles had a pretty interesting 10 years in Indiana. I think you could write a pretty interesting book on his time here. You know, the Pacers correctly identified him in the draft as somebody that should have been drafted much higher than he was. I think if you redraft that 2015 draft class, Turner probably goes something like 4th or 5th. Instead of you know, where the Pacers got him, and which was off the top of my head, I think 12th or around there. And he had a great first couple of seasons. The Paul George trade happened. You know, he kind of played second fiddle at the center position to Domantas Sabonis for a few years. Was out of position. Frankly, had a couple of down years in large part, I think, because of that. Tyrese Halliburton came in, Rick Carlisle came in and kind of changed his world. They put him in positions to succeed. He did succeed, and you know, really has embraced Indiana the whole way. And so I was surprised. The reason I won't give it a 10 is because when the Tyrese Halliburton injury happened, I remember sitting there in Oklahoma City on our radio row, and I remember thinking, not only, you go through something like that almost in waves, like a loss you might, and my first thought was, what does it mean for this game and the championship potential? But then my second thought was, what does this mean for next year? What does this mean for the next 5 years? And all of a sudden, the plan in place had the potential to alter. And so look, going, deep into the luxury tax when you don't have your best player doesn't always seem like the most fiscally responsible move. So I can't say I was 10 out of 10 shocked, but I was 8 or 9 out of 10 shocked because I thought, frankly, what Milwaukee did was shocking too, to free up that space with Damian Lillard and to make that move. And, it's been a tough loss for the Pacers because they don't have that immediate starting center right now. But at the same time, Miles provided 10, I think, really good years in Indiana. Frustrating to see him leave. In my opinion, frustrating to see how he's handled some of that exit. But at the same time, when you're a free agent, you're allowed to do whatever you want to do, and we'll see how his time goes in Milwaukee. I think it's a risky move for him because everything hinges on what Giannis wants to do. And right now they're sitting, I think, here at 8-8, which seems like they're, right on the edge of things going really well or really poorly. But there's no question that the Pacers missed his on-floor ability, and there's no question that in the next, year or so, one of the top items that you have to figure out from a front office perspective is how to replace him or shore up the center position a little bit.
I'm talking with Pat Boylan. He is the voice of the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Pat, one final thought on the Pacers. What are the bright spots? Because now Matherin's back, like you mentioned, the other Canadian on your team was injured. Now he's come back and he's playing with a bit of a vengeance right now. His numbers are very impressive. Pascal, when he has been healthy most of the year, has been very good. I think he's averaging 23 and change. Having Ryan back, are you more hopeful that the Pacers can, like you said, they're playing in a more competitive way? Are they starting to figure things out a little bit better so that they can be in more games and win some of the games that they should win?
Yeah, I think so. And, it's not my job to tell anybody in your listening audience who to root for, but I will make the point that you were sort of making there, which is if you're in search of an NBA team and you're a Canadian, the Pacers are a pretty good pick. I mean, you've got Andrew Nembhard, who's Canadian, you've got Benedict Mathurin, who's Canadian, and I know Pascal Siakam with his time in Toronto kind of feels like an adopted Canadian, and those are the three best players on the Pacers right now, with Tyrese Halliburton hurt. So it's kind of been our 2.5 Canadian grouping that's been trying to get the Pacers through this. And Siakam has been healthy in that stretch, but Nembhard has not and Mathurin has not. But right now the trio is. And I think it's one of those cases where the Pacers were deep enough and had enough talent, in my opinion, to lose Tyrese Halliburton, but still win, I think, 44 to 47 games was realistic if health was on their side. It hasn't been even close to on their side. And so they're not, sniffing that number, at least on pace to do that right now, because it's not just that grouping that's been out. I mean, their depth has been decimated. They've been starting two-way guys, and they've been playing guys that weren't even in training camp, that were not even on a roster, like Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who's done an admirable job, by the way. But in an ideal situation, Quentin Jackson and Jeremiah Robinson Earl and Ray J. Dennis are not playing significant minutes for you, but they were earlier in the season. Now that has changed some, with Mathurin getting back, with Nembhard getting back, and with Siakam, you've got a really solid trio there. Maybe not a title contending trio, but you've got a solid trio there. They're just really still struggling from a depth perspective. They played last night in Cleveland, and I think this is the best example. If you look at the backcourt that Cleveland trots out there, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, you're talking about two all-stars. The Pacers backcourt of Nembhard and Mathurin combined to outscore that duo by a point. It was 53-52. Now, in a previous iteration of the Pacers, if your backcourt slightly outscores that Cleveland backcourt, you're feeling pretty darn good because top to bottom, you've got a deep team. And if you can match what their backcourt is doing, that might be the best backcourt in the NBA. Well, Siakam was good, but the Pacers didn't really have anybody step up beyond those top three. And that's, I think, the challenge right now. But if you look at when Benedict Mathurin came back, they played 3 games, so still small sample size. First half, he got into some foul trouble, barely played in Detroit of game number 1. But in the second half of Detroit, the Pacers outscored the Pistons, and in large part because Mathurin was fantastic. Next game, they win against Charlotte. Mathurin, very good. And last night, they hung around with Cleveland. It's a results-driven league, so I don't want to sit here and play the moral victory game, but the way things have been so down bad here the last month or so, hanging with Cleveland in Cleveland, Mathurin plays well. I think all encouraging signs. So the biggest but is, can they stay healthy? And they're not healthy, but can they stay the version of healthy they are? Because they can ill afford an injury, another one to any of those 3 guys. But if they can keep those 3 together, Aaron Nesmith is probably 3-ish weeks away. Obi Toppin is still long-term, and Tyrese Halliburton is out for the season. But you have the makings of, I think, what you were hoping for at the beginning of the season, which is still to be competitive. The major asterisk there is you're 2-14. So you've dug yourself in a massive, massive hole. And I don't know exactly how realistic it is that a group without Tyrese Halliburton can dig its way all the way out of that. But at the same time, I've learned the last couple of years with the Pacers not to put ceilings on what they're capable of, because if you would have done that, you would have not said they could go to the NBA Finals Game 7. You would have, the year before, not said they could have gone to the Eastern Conference Finals. So we'll see. It still is very early, but the hole that they have dug themselves in is considerable.
It is considerable, and I think about just the whole challenge that NBA franchises have with injured players. Like, you look at Boston's situation. I mean, when you think of 2 years ago, that very good series between Boston and Indiana, when Indiana had a chance in a couple of games to actually beat the Celtics and take a sizable lead in that series, where Boston ultimately went on to win the championship. Last year, Tatum also goes out with a ruptured Achilles. Then, of course, what happened to Tyrese, the decimation of injuries to a key player. Milwaukee right now, they had a great start largely because Antetokounmpo was playing at an unbelievable level. Now he's out. Now they're coming back down to earth, of course. But injuries really are a topic of discussion that is far and wide across the NBA. And let's cross over to the WNBA, because injury to Caitlin Clark, that's Tyrese Halliburton-esque in terms of impact on a franchise. You're talking about the face of the WNBA, the heavy duty leader of the Indiana Fever. He goes out, and what's interesting about it, Pat, that strikes me is, up until this past year, Caitlin was pretty much an injury-free player. Now, she's getting older. She's playing in a professional league, not a college league. All the different factors that you can take into it. But were the Fever correct in shutting her down last year and not trying to force her to come back into the lineup? Because in spite of Caitlin being out, the Fever actually had, I think, a season that for a lot of people was better than expected.
No question. I actually think there are some parallels to the universe where the Pacers stay healthy minus the Tyrese Halliburton injury this year, which we were talking about earlier did not happen. But if the Pacers had only lost Tyrese Halliburton and most of the rest of that core stayed reasonably healthy the rest of the way, I think you might have seen a similar type Pacers season that you saw with the Fever with Caitlin Clark going down. Now, they suffered numerous, it wasn't just Caitlin, they suffered numerous other injuries and were playing that. I mean, I've said the word hardship exception more in the last 5 months than I have in the previous 11 years of my career here at Pacer Sports and Entertainment. I mean, it's becoming almost exhausting to talk about. But that's the type of season I was hoping for the Pacers. They just got totally decimated by injury. To answer your question, yes, Caitlin Clark is, everything about the future of this franchise. That's not to say she's the only thing. There's, of course, many reasons to be optimistic, and there are numerous stars on this roster, including Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell, who were brilliant who are both totally available for the entirety of the season, and massive that those two stayed healthy and were able to carry the Fever to what they are able to. But this franchise, its future is absolutely Caitlin Clark centric. And so you have to think bigger picture. And I know I'm going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I think you'll understand the distinction here. The Tyrese Halliburton injury that he suffered in Game 7, of course, it rose red flags, among the training staff. Whenever you have a calf injury like he suffered in Game 5, you always worry about the Achilles happening. In a scenario where the Pacers are not fighting for an NBA championship, where they're not going into Game 7, a scenario where you win that game and you win an NBA championship, there's no chance Tyrese Halliburton is playing. But when that's on the line, you have to play. I mean, what else are you going, what's the point of even of suiting up if you're not going to play in a game like that, even with the injury risk that was there? So there should be no second guessing about the Tyrese Halliburton injury. But at the same time, with Caitlin Clark, that scenario is not apples to apples. And the last thing you wanted to happen with her is to suffer an injury by coming back too quickly. That then takes you out of next year as well, which unfortunately is the situation with the Pacers. So I think it was handled absolutely the correct way. Frustrating in the moment for sure. Admirable to watch, that group be in overtime away from going to the WNBA finals. I mean, both of the stories just kind of make me laugh as I say them because they're so improbable. The Pacers being a 4 seed and going to Game 7, the Fever having all these players out, not just Caitlin Clark, but, Sophie Cunningham and Sydney Colson and Ari McDonald. I mean, they suffered big time injury as well. And we're right on the doorstep of the WNBA finals. And so, I think it's a franchise that has to keep the bigger picture in mind. And it was a really inspiring year. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to reach your ceiling as a team with Caitlin Clark not available, in the same way that you're not going to be able to reach your ceiling as a team with Tyrese Halliburton not available. So the long-term health of those two is paramount. And the only scenario where you push it is if you're in Game 7 of the NBA Finals and the Pacers got an unfortunate, horrible break in that regard. But no second-guessing that decision, and I think no second-guessing the decision to shut Caitlin Clark down, because the two situations are quite different in my opinion.
I'm talking with Pat Boylan, the play-by-play voice of the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever, here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. We're going to take a real quick break right now, and we're going to come back with Pat on the deep dive. We'll talk a little bit more about Caitlin and the Fever, and we're also going to dive into Steve Kerr's comments on how the NBA has to address the rash of injuries that are taking place. Stay with us.
This month in Sports History Moment is brought to you by Discount Diesel Parts.
On November 1st, 1946, the first ever NBA game was played. The inaugural game of the then Basketball Association of America took place between the Toronto Huskies and the New York Knickerbockers at Maple Leaf Gardens. Despite a late game rally, the Huskies fell short, losing 68-66. It was a monumental moment as the beginning of one of the biggest leagues in sports history began in Canada.
Hi, folks. This is Big Al from Discount Diesel Parts. With over 70 years' experience, Interstate McBee is a leader in the heavy-duty diesel engine parts industry. And as an authorized dealer for over 20 years, we've been serving customers with those high-quality parts: gasket kits, water and oil pumps, turbos, fuel injectors, heads, in-frame kits, and at a great price, too. Reach us at discountdiesel.ca and know that Discount Diesel's got the parts to get it done.
When you hit the ice, it's all about you and your skates. The stride, the feel, the glide, the power, the performance. Why trust your skates to a grinding machine, or even worse, a tournament parent in a parking lot? At Aligned Custom Skate Performance in Sherwood Park, the art of skate fitting and sharpening is customized to the athlete.
Aligned Custom Skate Performance, where precision meets passion.
Visit AlignedSkate.com to learn more.
What keeps Alberta business moving? It's pallets, whether you're shipping, manufacturing, or looking for in-house storage solutions. Hi, it's Andrew with the Pallet Recycler here in Edmonton, and we've been providing reliable, affordable, recycled, and custom pallets for local businesses for the past 30 years. Contact the Pallet Recycler at 825-474-1981 to find out why recycled pallets are the most cost-effective way to move and store your product. Learn about our recycling program as well at thepalletrecycler.ca.
This is Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! We did it!
Here's your host, Paul Sir.
Welcome back to Hoop City with Paul Sir here on Sports 1440. I'm joined by Pat Boylan, the voice of the Indiana Fever and the Indiana Pacers. Pat, just finishing up with Caitlin. The read last year was there was an extraordinary amount of physical, some would call it dirty play, inflicted upon Caitlin that was not necessarily officiated at the level, certainly, that Indiana Fever fans would have liked, but even lacked support from the league that really called certain attitudes within the WNBA into question. Now, I'm not saying that's why Caitlin was out for the season. I don't want to make that claim, although certainly behind closed doors, I might say something different. But do you think there was something to the fact that the extreme physical play impacted Caitlin's ability to stay healthy?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I tend to lean no on that, but I'm not going to shut the door on the concept just because I don't know. I'm not in the training room. I don't know exactly, what led to the injuries that she was dealing with. The play that she got hurt on in Connecticut that ultimately, ended her season was non-contact. So I think it would be irresponsible to ignore it. But I think maybe a little bit of a reach to adamantly, profess that's why she got hurt. Sometimes injuries just happen. As you noted, she's been very healthy throughout her career, albeit it's different when you're talking about high school and college and the rigor and the grind of the WNBA. The bigger picture on that to me is, listen, I think there's almost a couple avenues on this. One of them is, I do think there needs to be an understanding that the WNBA can be physical at times. And when the NBA is physical at times, people aren't calling it out for being physical. And so sometimes I think there's a little bit of a double standard there. But more importantly, I think from a league-wide perspective, the NBA went through this in the 90s and the early 2000s where they looked at the game and they said, our stars are not able because of the way the game is played and officiated, our stars are not able to maximize their talents. And so there was kind of, the hand check was disallowed, for example. And if you go back and watch some of those 90s and early 2000s games, it almost feels like a different sport from what you're watching now. And I think the WNBA would benefit from a little tweaking in that regard. On one hand, I don't want to say that players can't be physical because physicality is a part of the game. But I think at the end of the day, people want to see stars and the top talent in the men's world and in the women's world be able to showcase that talent. And I do think, I don't know if there's a major shift that needs to happen, but I do think from a freedom of movement perspective, there are at minimum tweaks and adjustments that need to be made. As it relates to, how Caitlin Clark is officiated, I think that my motto on this has always been that professional basketball is the toughest sport in the world to officiate. And it's so easy for people to watch 5 replays on super slow-mo and then on the 5th one yell, oh, that's a foul, and they missed it when officials get one angle at one speed. That said, my motto on this has always been, from an officiating standpoint, you have to make your layups if you're the WNBA. You just have to, as it relates to this. And there was a scenario earlier last season, I should say, against Connecticut, where Marina Mabry, body checked her to the floor. Now, in the NBA, that is an unquestioned ejection immediately. And the WNBA rule is no different. And that was like mid-June, I think. I still remain flummoxed how 3 professional officials saw that happen, went to the monitor, watched it happen, and then came away with anything but an ejection. Of course, the league after the fact said it should have been an ejection. But in the moment, if your officials can't get that right, then that's a problem. So league-wide, I think there's an adjustment that could be made with freedom of movement, which would help the product, which I think is very, very good, by the way, but I think would make it even better. As it relates to Caitlin Clark and the officiating in the league, I think I tend to fall on the side of a little bit of an official apologist, because I see how fast the game is. I know how difficult it is to officiate, but the you have to make your layups theme always comes back in this case. And for a situation like what happened in that Connecticut game, for her to get bodied to the floor and then for it not to be an ejection, that's a layup. And that was a missed layup. And those are the things that really cannot happen, in my opinion.
Well, and I think it fueled the conspiracy theory fire that the officials were out.
No question.
Yeah, and you're right. That was a bad miss. That was a bad miss. That's a layup for them to make that call and just show that they're not biased, because the appearance was there was a bias in the wrong direction in that particular moment in time. But it's an interesting segue into something I wanted to get your feedback on, Pat, and that is Steve Kerr's comments this past week about the league making adjustments, and by the league I mean the NBA in this case, making some adjustments to start addressing the alarming number of injuries happening, not just to star players, which are happening at a rate, but also league-wide. And you just were talking about some of the injuries that the Indiana Pacers are fighting their way through. It's interesting that you mentioned the 90s and the 2000s, because when you think of Bill Laimbeer clotheslining Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and the physical play in the 80s and 90s, you are so correct when you talk about this being a completely different sport. It is a completely different sport now. And a lot of the physical play that took place at those times have been ruled out, if I can use that term, or officiated out of the way the game is played now. However, Kerr makes a compelling point about the pace of play, the amount of running that a player has to do now because of the explosion into three-point shooting and the style of play. And I've got a couple of suggestions that will never happen in terms of how to address this. But I think, what are your thoughts, Pat, about some of the comments that Steve Kerr made? Like, number one, we know that the NBA is not going to reduce the number of games. That ain't going to happen. But what about back-to-backs? What about some of the other suggestions that Kerr made?
Yeah, it's a heavy topic. There's a lot to talk about with it. I always begin a discussion like this with the disclaimer of I am not a doctor, nor do I even try to play one on radio or TV. So anything that I say here,
I can't call you Dr. Pat now.
Please don't. My high school GPA will confirm that I should not be called Dr. Pat. But you watch a lot of basketball. I watch a lot of basketball. And frankly, you go back and watch. I mean, I'm thinking of this because it was just on my mind because of Lenny Wilkins, rest in peace, his passing. NBA TV in the U.S. was playing I think it was the 1979 Game 5 where Lenny Wilkins Sonics won the NBA championship. Now, we're talking a long time ago in 79, but it's startling how different of a game it was. And even so true watching, I mean, listen, anybody here in Indianapolis or Indiana grew up like me on 90s Pacers. It was basketball heaven in the 90s and the early 2000s. And yet you go back and watch some of those, you watch the 2000 finals against the Lakers, and don't get me wrong. I mean, Reggie and Kobe and Shaq, the star power was fantastic. The games were competitive. But at least for me, I think the product is a lot more enjoyable now. Now, you can make a case that in some areas the heavy three-point shooting has gone a little bit too far, but it's amazing, really, to watch 20 years ago and watch the NBA now, and it's wildly different. I think Kerr makes a ton of good points. I think the amount of area, for example, that a defender has to cover. You watch the 2000, let's see, it would have been the 2005, I think, conference finals between the Pacers and the Pistons. I mean, it's a lot of guy back down in the lane and four guys are maybe not standing around, but like from a defender's perspective, what you're asked to do, the physical exertion on your body is just wildly different. So it makes a lot of sense to me. And we had a conversation, I think maybe back in late June or early July, after Tyrese Halliburton's injury. The other thing, and I don't know if this makes any medical sense, but the other thing that I think is potentially valid is each generation is more athletic than the last. But is each generation, the ligaments and all of that, is that growing equal with the athleticism? I mean, you look at these Achilles tears, and a lot of them happen in this similar situation where a player takes a step back and load bears on that lower portion of that leg, and that's where a lot of these Achilles tears are happening. Have the Achilles strengthened as generations have passed to keep up with the athleticism, the wild athleticism that you're seeing from today's athletes? I don't know that answer, but I think that also contributes to it. And, I will say, when I started with the Pacers in 2014, 2015, the amount of back-to-backs we have now is significantly down. I think you can still continue to try to cut them down, but part of the dispiriting thing to me is it's like the league has way less back-to-back now than it did 10 years ago, and it's a bigger problem now than it was 10 years ago. And I don't know what the answer to that is, because I don't want to diminish the product as a result to keep players healthy, but you're right. I mean, way too many star players are out right now, and that's especially concerning in a star-driven league like the NBA.
Well, and I think, Pat, a couple of comments, first of all, about the bygone eras. I grew up, I am fortunate enough to be old enough to have watched Wilt play Russell. And and then through all of the generations since then. And, of course you idealize what you watched in the day. But when I watch Larry Bird and the Celtics square off against Magic and the Lakers, I mean, there was magic in those moments because you didn't know any better. But when you watch it now and you watch how they play defense and you watch the spacing on offense, I mean, you've got Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Larry Bird, all monstrous people. And they were all playing below the free throw line. Like the spacing differences were just totally different. And you're absolutely right. You cannot deny the athleticism 1 through 14 on any NBA roster right now. And the pace of play, all about it is the game has improved in many, many respects. They've taken a lot of the physical play out. The injuries, I think there is a lot of wear and tear here. We were talking, Josh, my producer, and I were talking before about the kids playing AAU from when they're 10 years old and being told that they got to play 12 months out of the year. It all contributes. It all goes into the injury stew and has to be dealt with. I'm going to give you my radical idea on one thing that could be done that would help tremendously in terms of the space that you'd have to cover is take away one of the rules that I loathe the most in the NBA, and that is defensive 3 seconds. I despise that rule. That, to me, I understand the reasoning behind it and all of that, but my gosh, if you could put Rudy Gobert in the center where he belongs and was plugging up the lane, the NBA would have to adapt. Players would have to cover less space, and things would be very, very different at that point. Now, that's me being a hack and just coming up with a real simplistic attitude. I believe in what I'm saying, though. I wish they would get rid of the defensive 3 seconds. But, there are things that they would have to do, but there are things that you really can't adapt to, and that players are so much more athletic, and whether bones, muscles, and tendons have kept up with this increased athleticism, speed of play, and rigorous schedule, it's really hard to come up with a definitive answer.
You referred to it as a stew, and I think that's really the best way to think of this, is it's not one thing, right? It's 5 or 6 different ingredients that are mixing here together. And, the idea of defensive 3 seconds is interesting. The NBA, I don't want to say it's in a crisis spot, because the NBA is still wildly popular and in a major growth phase, but it is a red flag. So in my opinion, in this topic, we're in the no bad ideas land, because any idea to help improve this should be taken seriously. I had never considered the one that you brought up. It's interesting. It certainly is, and part part of defensive 3 seconds too is part of that bygone era of, to keep Shaquille O'Neal and to keep Charles Barkley from just hanging out in the paint. And that wasn't the most interesting basketball. Some of that's offensive 3 seconds as well. But it's an interesting thought. It's an interesting concept. It's one of those things where this is where the G League is potentially quite helpful, because they can guinea pig rules with the G League. They do that all the time. They use it in the WNBA too. I mean, the 14-second reset on the shot clock on an offensive rebound, they tried that in the WNBA, and the first time I saw it, I was like, why have we not been doing this for 50 years? There's no reason a team needs 24 full seconds when they get an offensive rebound and they're already at their end of the floor. So, this is where the G League's valuable, to guinea pig ideas like this, because it is a problem. It's not a death knell for the league by any stretch of the imagination, but you just hate to see scenarios where, Boston is eliminated from the playoffs because Jason Tatum tears his Achilles, and then 4 weeks later, the Pacers are eliminated from the playoffs because Tyrese Halliburton tears his Achilles. I mean, you want these games decided by the best players on the floor, and unfortunately, we did not have that in the 2025 playoffs, and frankly, the Pacers benefited from it a little bit too. Darius Garland was available for only 3 of the 5 games and not 100% in that Cavs series either. So, it adds a dimension of uncontrollable and a dimension of luck to the equation, which maybe can allow unexpected outcomes, which, that's good for the NBA. The NBA shouldn't be too predictable, but that should not be coming because of injuries and because of star players being out. And I wish I had better ideas. It sounds like Adam Silver is investing in some, real high level technology. Sounds like a good idea to me, although I have no idea what that entails. But any and all ideas are good ideas, or at least ones that should be considered in my book.
Well, Pat, you've been extremely generous with your time today. Thank you so much for spending your time with us on the deep dive on Hoop City with Paul Sir. I really look forward to our next conversation, and I hope the Pacers are able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, start winning some games, and be rewarded for all the great things that this organization has done. And of course, the same goes with the Indiana Fever. And all the best to you, Pat. Thanks again for your time.
I appreciate that. And we have chatted certainly during some of the very highest of highs and the lowest of lows over the last 5 or 6 months in the Pacers organization. So it's been an interesting time to chat with you. But I enjoyed the time as well. I'm looking forward to our next visit.
Likewise, Pat Boylan, voice of the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever, joining us here on Hoop City. We're going to take a break, and then we'll wrap things up for this week's show.
Smart, connected, community-driven. Jason Greger sets the standard for sports talk in Edmonton. Join the conversation on Sports 1440. Text Greger, 833-401-1440. Sports 1440, where Edmonton talks sports.
Cooperators can help make a retirement plan around your plans. Like the wait till that beach in Bali gets a load of 65-year-old me plan. Talk to us today about how to turn your retirement goals into retirement realities.
Looking for a local Cooperators representative? Give Camrose Insurance Financial Solutions a call at 780-672-9251 and see the difference a personalized plan makes. Cooperators, investing in your future together.
This Christmas, taste the flavors of the season at Farmhouse Bakery in Camrose. We believe in baking that brings back memories. That's why our 3 kinds of fruitcake are made the old-fashioned way. Dense, delicious, and packed with real fruit and nuts. You'll also find buttery shortbread, Norwegian spice cookies, and all the other goodies that make the holidays special. Christmas traditions from our 4th-generation family farm to you. Farmhouse Bakery, next to Dairy Queen, Camrose.
So I told him, sometimes size does matter, especially at Christmas.
Catch of the week, we say go big or go home, or buy big, then serve it at home. We have massive shrimp, as big as my hand, plus huge king crab. Simply the biggest selection of seafood and platters, all here at the largest fish and seafood market in Western Canada.
Because sometimes size does matter. Catch of the Week in Gold Bar Center. Online at catchoftheweekedmonton.com. Edmonton's best seafood.
From the first face-off Sports 1440 is your home for hockey talk with live coverage, expert analysis, and pre- and post-game shows. We bring you closer to the game. Tune in 24/7 only on Sports 1440, Edmonton's sports station. This is Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! What a shot from Curry! We did it!
Here's your host, Paul Sir.
Welcome back to Hoop City as we go into the final segment today. Josh, let's start with an update on how our intelligent, wise listeners have voted on our poll question today.
Our intelligent, wise listeners have deemed the most impressive early season team performance so far the Toronto Raptors.
Homers.
Yeah, but
but they're right.
Well, it's either them or the Pistons.
Yes.
I voted the Raptors because I am a homer, but it's honestly, in all actuality, probably the Pistons.
Well, it is, but the Pistons had a great year last year where the Raptors didn't. I mean, the Pistons started this turnaround last year, and the Raptors were dismal.
It's true. They were. I think my only counterpoint to that really would be they're doing it with so many. I mean, the Raptors are getting it done with a lot of different people, but they have that four-headed monster. They've had Cade games, games where Cade has been out for them, and Duran or
Cade and Duran out.
And
Tobias Harris out.
Tobias Harris. Or they have all these people that are out of these games, and they still manage to just string these wins together, which I'm just incredibly impressed by the play of the Detroit Pistons.
JB Bickerstaff is their coach, and JB played at the University of Minnesota. I saw him play a lot when he played in the Big Ten, and he was a tough, hard-nosed guy who really wasn't a super talented athlete, but just got it done because of his raw determination. And he can't, of course, his father was an NBA coach as well, so he has a great pedigree, but he has instilled a tremendous culture of toughness in Detroit. It ties into something we touched on last week, Josh, and that I've had an opportunity to talk with both Kevin and Jason on their shows during the week. And that is this trend, I believe, that's taken root in the NBA, largely due to the success of the OKC Thunder and the Denver Nuggets, of coaches doing a better job of identifying what their strengths are with the personnel that they have, as opposed to thinking they all have to play like the Golden State Warriors or the Boston Celtics with high volume 3-point shooting, just running screen and roll actions, where now you're seeing a lot more creativity taking place. And I give credit to organizations trying to build culture around the talent that they've got. And I think that largely goes to Coach Darko. A shout out goes to Coach Darko and the Toronto Raptors, in that they have done a great job of taking the blend of talent of long athletic players and making them buy into team play and become a real effective unit, at least in the first quarter of the 25-26 season.
Raptors also hold the number one half-court offense in the NBA right now.
They're doing a great job. And what's I think most impressive about that stat that you just read, Josh, is they're doing it while they're playing fast as well. So you're being efficient and you're looking to fast break and create transition opportunities. So the Raptors really, really have done a great job this year. Before we wrap up, I do want to touch on an area that I think is really interesting. And I've heard a lot of discussion and read a lot of articles about it lately. There's something called the second apron in the NBA, which really, when you boil it all down, is a hard salary cap. That if you exceed your cap on your team, and I'm paraphrasing this poorly, and you go into what's called a second apron in overspending on what you pay your players, you pay an exorbitant tax on your wages to the point where it's crippling to franchises. And that's why you've seen the Boston Celtics, for instance, they have new ownership coming in. who don't have the deep pockets of their previous ownership, and they've unloaded a ton of salary, and most likely they're going to have to unload one of their high-salaried players as well. I think it'll be Jaylen Brown that they're probably going to try to find a way to deal. But the other issue that this second apron creates is how do you offload Jaylen Brown, who's making $60 million a year? Who has the cap space in their payroll to be able to absorb a player of that ilk, who is one of the great players in the NBA? But how are you going to afford them? There's a lot of teams that would love to find a way to package the players together to get Jaylen Brown, but it's going to be very difficult for them.
Yeah. I know this summer coming up, the Wizards have the Wizards are just the dumping ground of the NBA. All the bad contracts go there, but they're able to write off like $113 million in cap or something like that. They still have Jan Mahimi on contract. He hasn't played professional basketball in 4 years.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
That world is crazy. The zeros at the end of the checks that are written are incredible, but you can be making money like that 4 years after you've even stepped on the court. It's really silly money. It almost feels like a Monopoly game at times, but it's very, very real. Now, here's what's going to be interesting. Will a team like Washington that is in that position to possibly sign elite talent because of the write-offs that they're able to garner now, will they be able to bring the kind of players in around a nucleus of some pretty good young talent and be able to build up a winning franchise? I think that's the risk that they're taking, that they're going to do the OKC thing and build by the draft and then signing a couple of key players because they've been strategic in tanking and being able to have the cap space to bring a player in. I guess the question I'd put to you, Josh, you're a player in the NBA. Do you want to go play in Washington?
No, not unless I get traded there.
Absolutely.
But I think that also Washington or any team that's willing to accept salary at this point kind of has the upper hand in trade negotiations, because the teams that are trying to dump these contracts are trying to dump the contracts. So like Jaylen Brown, the Celtics might get a first round pick out of, or might get more than one first round pick out of Jaylen Brown, but whoever they try to deal him to, the receiving team can be like, well, I'm not going to give you 3 first round picks because I know you're giving me Jaylen Brown, but if I don't take this trade, all of a sudden you're digging into your own pockets to pay the NBA. And then, that's more money in the pot for the rest of us. So maybe I don't have to worry about taking this contract on. So it gives a lot of the receiving teams a better advantage in trades. It's just.
Well, that's a really good point, Josh. And I think it leads into a bigger point, which is no longer is our LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh going to be showing up in franchises at franchise press conferences saying that this big three that are making max contracts are going to play together. Those days are fading away. Look at Memphis right now. I mean, it is a train wreck of a team. And you've got a guy in Ja Morant who enormously talented, but what a head case, had taken himself out of the lineup because of his stupidity by going to clubs with guns, for goodness sakes, making horrible off-court decisions. Now he's getting injured and he has a monstrous contract. So you've got a guy that's, I heard the Raptors, mentioned in a lot of the hot take websites that are around talking about possible trades about why not go for Ja Morant. I wouldn't touch Ja Morant with a 5,000-mile pole in terms of bringing that kind of dollar in. I don't care about his talent. If you're looking at culture now, which again seems to be a buzzword and a very big consideration in terms of who you bring into your organization, why would you want Ja Morant? Why would you want to pay that guy who has created those kind of locker room problems and bring him into your organization because he's really talented? That ship for guys like that is probably sailing in a way that's been very, very different than in the past when problem children have been taken, where Franchises will take chances on problem players who really struggle off the court, and then they bring them into their organization thinking they're going to be the organization that's able to take this guy in and really turn it around.
Yeah, I was listening to about half of what you said. I was watching the Raptors replays from last night.
Boy, I really a captivating
so
host
sick.
is what you're saying.
You're a super captivating host, and I agree. Teams, the idea of bringing a guy like a John Morant in anymore, who with that kind of price tag, who brings that much not just locker room trouble but full organizational trouble, is probably becoming a thing of the past.
Well, and again, you're looking at this now 16-1 Oklahoma City Thunder, who have a ton of draft picks left, along with a young lineup, of which they're going to be shedding players from as they continue to perform well, presupposing that they continue to play well and continue to develop and grow. They're going to be shedding players, but they've done it so well by trading Paul George away. It's still one of the worst trades in NBA history. But they've been able to do that by building this organization around a good citizen and a great player like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That music coming on is called David's Song, written by my son Ben, who we lost 2.5 years ago. He dedicated this song to his friend David Finkelman, who also died tragically in a terrible traffic accident. And every week I pay tribute to my son Ben, who was a kind, generous person who looked out for people who were really struggling in their lives. And Ben passed too soon, as did David, who was similar. And I always refer to this, not just because of my own personal loss and our family's personal loss, but because of, I think, the lesson that I would like to always share with people is make sure that you tell those that you love that you do love them. Make sure that you look out for other people, and also think the best of others. Don't get caught up in the political talk and start thinking poorly of others. Think the best of others. Think best of your fellow man. Think best of your family. And for goodness sakes, for the people that you love, tell them that you love them. I want to thank you all. Josh, thank you very much for a great show today.
Thanks for having me on for the ride, Paul. Hopefully I'll be here next week.
I hope you are too. And it's been exciting to be on YouTube with you all today. Thanks for listening. If you're on our podcast, thanks for tuning in. We're looking forward to having another great show with you next week. So in the meanwhile, from Paul Sir, from Josh Fenwick, here on Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440, have a great week on and off the court.